Mr. Chairman, could I open our meeting?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I'd like to open a meeting of a duly posted school committee. We have a quorum, and the sole item on the agenda is a presentation to the Finance Committee related to the fiscal 13 budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You are getting two documents, and I'll just send the group that way. And the first one that I'll reference is called Draft Wareham Public Schools, and this says draft because it was kind of finalized today and the school board hasn't seen it, so that's why it's draft, and you're having first view at it. And when I go to the school committee, they may decide to make some changes, so that's why it's draft. The beginning of this talks about some of the programs that we have instituted to try to close the achievement gap. That's the first paragraph. It talks about we've made some progress in this regards, but it is going to be difficult without the resources to continue these projects. Down below it in the chart, and knowing that this is the Finance Committee, I know that we like charts and numbers. The FY13 school budget is here shown as it was voted at the 3/21 school committee meeting, where we actually reduced our budget by $1,121,000 from what we had asked for. And the way we got there was doing a subtraction. So now if I reference to you the second paper, there are two sides to it, but the one that's the bigger chart shows Article 20, which is the debt exclusion that we have added to the town meeting for educational material for $341,000. And Article 26, which is the article for an operational override of $780,000 to not have any teacher layoffs. The two of those together subtotaled to $1,121,000. So down below that you can see net school spending articles minus the articles, or net school spending minus the articles is $26,074,370. At that Saturday morning that we attended, the TA's budget that was brought forward at that particular time, in fact, on the 21st it was changed. So the new number here is the correct number as it was changed on the 21st before our school board meeting, which was $25,140,794. That still presents the school department with a shortfall from what the TA was proposing and what we needed to get to, of $933,576. On the back of the large chart, we have proposals to cut to level funded. I will say to you, this has not been funded by the Wareham School Board. These are my proposals that will be discussed.
Not funded, approved.
Not approved, excuse me. And the first group that you see, I broke into subcategories. So the first one, the subtotal, is for programmatic cuts, where I went through the budget and took out any of the new programs. The additional tutoring for students that don't qualify for the tutoring because of low income status. The additional MCAS remediation. the summer school that has been free at the middle school for the last 4 years. Completely cut. Professional development money cut by $10,000. That comes up to $121,396. The next grouping, or any new staff that was added in the FY13 budget. Math teacher at the high school, job coach for the co-op, a special ed teacher for Wareham High School. That adds up to $145,000. The next grouping, our existing staff. Assistant principal elementary school. The reason that number is $48,000 instead of a larger number is that person was a teacher in the district and will bump back in, so the net savings will only be of a new teacher. That would be dropped near the bottom. One custodian, one secretary. Educational administration is another administrative position, as well as some consolidations. A part-time CNA that we use for coverage of nursing situations. That adds up to $235,041. Then I've taken the retirements, any of the teachers who are retiring, and we would replace with younger, less expensive teachers. $114,395 savings. Cutting money from the substitute teacher line, substitute custodian line, those three add up to $174,000. Altogether, column 1 equals $675,832. About, I don't know, a quarter of the way down the page on the right side in column 2, you'll see shortfall after articles were $933,576. Adding up column 1 is $675,832. That still leaves me with a deficit of needing to cut $257,744. At the top of column 2 are scenarios that have to be discussed with the school committee to find out which of these or what combination of these might be the right way to get to that number. And I have listed the total cost of the programs. The total sports program for the schools, $310,125. All extracurricular activities, all of the stipends for advisors, $90,680. The entire instructional leader program that we started, $345,017. The cooperative school, where we have our students that are not being successful at Wareham High School and the Wareham Middle School, that is $452,000. The total of all of those equals $887,697. I don't think I have to say, but I will say for the record that I'm not in favor of any of these cuts. I came before this board back in December, I believe it was, and laid out a needs-based budget. Clearly showed that we had a deficit in attainment of our educational goals. I also showed that according to the state, where our funding is and where the state is, there is a deficit in funding in this community for education. And if we're going to bridge that gap, we need to bridge the gap in funding. I know this is a difficult year, so people have asked, how can you get to the number? Before you are the way that we can get to the number. On the back of the long paper, I have explanations of the various debt exclusions that the school committee is proposing. And instead of going through each one and explaining them, if you just look about 3/4 of the way down at the chart of the debt exclusions, it will show you that we're looking for $360,000 for the purchase of buses, $110,000 for the high school gymnasium roof, $341,000 for educational materials, which I mentioned, referenced already, and the feasibility study necessary to move ahead for the Minot Forest project. That totals to a very large number of $1,386,000. However, if we then look at what a taxpayer who has a medium-priced house of $230,000 would pay in additional taxes over 5 years, the numbers are here, and the total added to the taxes would be $14.23 a year for 5 years to fund all of those debt exclusions. Through the chair?
Chair. Did I miss, is this per $100,000?
For, no, a $230,000 house, your tax would go up $4.90 to pay off that $360,000 for the purchase of the bus.
Yep.
Okay, so adding them all, it comes out to $14.23.
And that happens to be the median price home in Wareham.
That was good. Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Chair, there's another question?
I just have one question, and it's about the extracurriculum advisors. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit, on who they are and what they do?
Every club and activity that you can imagine. So National Junior Honor Society, National Senior Honor Society, Student Council, classes, the Decker program, every single program that we have. Thank you. Senior class advisor, junior class advisor. So taking them all out of the contract, that's the number that you come up with.
I applaud you on breaking this out for the taxpayer. I think this will be very helpful at town meeting.
Mr. Paulson?
I have two questions. On the sheet here, the 8.5, the small sheet, if you will. On the back of it, you have the scenarios to reach the new numbers, and you have in the second column 310,000, 90,000, and 345 and 452, and then a number that of 887 and change. I'm trying to reconcile the different numbers above to that 887. That's my first question.
All right, the 887 is if you added up all those scenarios. So if we completely cut sports, completely got rid of extracurricular, completely got rid of the instructional leaders, and closed the cooperative school, that would add up to $887,697.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. I think you left the 310.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I leave out?
The math doesn't
You left
add
the
up.
310
It doesn't add up.
Oh, all right. So when I pulled it down and pushed the button, I must have left a cell off. I apologize.
Well,
1,197,000.
yeah, well, okay.
Big number.
Yeah, it is a big number.
1,900,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
1,197,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just to that point, these are the scenarios, again, the superintendent is going to propose to us that these are the total numbers and that we would need to take a look at those and either agree or challenge the superintendent on getting to, within these numbers, getting to the 257,744. So even though he gave you the subtotal there, he's not proposing to cut the 1 point, what those add up to. It's just those are the things that he's going to ask us to look at and to take maybe, 100,000 out of sports or, $10,000 out of extracurricular to come up with the 257,744. That's still the shortfall.
Okay. My second question, if I might, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
ma'am.
The roughly $500,000 to do the evaluation of Minot, what is the ballpark estimate, sitting here today, ballpark now, of what the cost might be to do Minot?
I could not tell you. That's one of the things that comes out at the end of, in fact, I believe in the explanation of the articles on this side, it goes through Article 28, goes through and explains what's involved in a feasibility study. And one part of that is to come up with a complete set of plans that they then do the cost estimate from. So you need a set of plans in order to get the price. Every project is different depending on the environment and the existing conditions and so forth.
If I might just pursue this just for a moment. He must have some idea. Is it gonna be a $2 million job, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million?
The Wareham Middle School project cost us $23 million, and that was an expansion and renovation, and that finished in 2005.
And what, might not be more complicated than that, less complicated? What's your guess?
For the record, I cannot tell you, and I will not guesstimate, because I'm not an architect or an engineer. So I really think we need to wait until I have the numbers to tell you that number. It could be more, it could be less.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, because I also, please, if I may, because I also cited in that conversation when I was held with the state. Basically, they're going to come in and do an analysis, and they will present to us the alternatives that are available to us. And it has to go far beyond just the construction of the building. It also has to go into the educational curriculum and how the building is structured to deal with that. And I also got the impression there's consideration being given to the fact that the other school has 6 portable classrooms that need to be eliminated, etc. The state, basically what happens is they work with us to drop the plan, and then they tell us what they'll fund, if they will fund something at all. All right, now they will fund something, but the question is we might want A, but they'll tell us they will only do B. And that might be more than we originally thought, or it could be less than we originally thought. So that's why, Dr. Bennett is saying he can't give you a number, because right now, we don't know the scope that the state is going to set on the project. Mr. Sweat?
I'm actually somewhat sympathetic to Dick's question, in the sense that if you had an idea of what the ultimate cost was going to be, then you would say, then since I can absorb that, it's worth hiring an architect to refine it. In essence, the feasibility study is trying to get us an estimate, but if we don't think we can afford even the broad outlines of something. So even if you took, let's round number it, okay? It's probably going to be closer to 30 than 20. Let's call it 30, better to overestimate. We'll say we get a 2/3 reimbursement. That's the state's come up with 20, we come up with 10. Median contribution for $1 million from a household is about $68. Multiply that by 5 years. We paid off the middle school in 5 years. 5 times 68 is $340, if I'm doing my math correctly, something like that. $340 over 5 years for the median taxpayer to get a brand new elementary school. That's my rough numbers, and I could be off a little bit either way.
I would suspect that the cost will be somewhere between $7 and $10 million to the town, provided we meet the state's qualifications to get 70% reimbursement.
Thank you.
Does that help? Tom, you have a question?
Right through you, yes. Is the state putting a time limit or a deadline on us to do this? I mean, does this have to be done within?
We have 270 days in which to get authorization for the money to do this.
For just the feasible study?
Just the feasibility study, that is correct.
That
They do each thing in order.
Okay,
So
and that's 60% reimbursement, correct?
60% is guaranteed for this feasibility study. Then, as part of the next step of the feasibility, they negotiate with you and ask for data to determine what higher percent you're eligible for.
I was going to add, November 9th is the last day that we have to come up with the money. If we do not have the money allocated by that point, then we're off the list.
We're off the list. Okay, that's what I want to.
Mr. Trudell?
2 questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman. In capital planning today, it was stated that should we not come up with the money, that we would then fall off the list and begin a process all over again, which would take us potentially 10 years to get us back to where we are now. Is that a valid statement?
If I can.
Please.
People are confused because there used to be a list, and once you got on the list, you slowly moved up, And it could have taken you 10 years from when you got on until you got it. That's how we did the middle school project. There is no longer a list. They only accept the projects that they're prepared to fund that year, that they have the funds for. And so once you get accepted, which took us 2.5 years to get accepted, if you fall off of it, you have to begin the process again. And any other district that came before you and maybe can show a greater need may get on and you may not. So it could take you 3 years, it could take you 5, it could take 10. I don't want to say for surety that it's going to be 10 years.
I will just take it that the person who stated that today at the capital planning misspoke. Second question, having attended your all-day session and evening session there, one of the things that you emphasized was there were new requirements for math teachers in the high school, and that not only did the state impose that on you, but many neglected to give you money to take care of the textbooks. So looking at your proposed cuts to level funded, I see we're talking a math teacher at the high school for $45,000. This is going to be a really ugly cut.
I don't know how to answer except to say I look at everything on this sheet as ugly.
Well, yeah.
It is dismantling what has taken years to build. And once you lose confidence from the populace who send their children to our schools, I think at that meeting some people stood up and talked about, at the public hearing that we had, about if they lose confidence and class size goes up, they'll make the determination to move their children down the road to Old Rochester, to Bourne, to private schools, and they won't be back.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Sweat.
I personally find hyperbole distasteful, so what I'm about to say is intentionally not hyperbole, but what I absolutely believe, and I think there's a lot of reason to believe it. We are about 500 students below what we were at our maximum, which was about a decade ago. But actually, it's only about 250 students below what we could be at. In other words, we've only lost 250 because people are chosen not to come to Wareham. So there's just been an erosion of the overall population, if you will. If you look at that 250, about 2/3 of it is to the parochial system. There is no question in my mind that we are, if all of this is forced on us, there's no question in my mind that well, this is a bit of hyperbole, but it's not mine, it's something a parent said to me. We're beginning a death spiral for the Wareham Public Schools, and to a lesser extent, but perhaps even more importantly, to the community of Wareham. In the sense that the kind of children that leave are, almost by definition, the result of parents that care. And obviously, parents that have the mobility and the means to leave. I don't think there's a teacher alive who wouldn't say, above all else, give me a parent that cares. We already have about 50% of our middle school population, and I suspect I can extrapolate to include the whole population. 50% of our middle school population is single parent children. So this is anything that contributes to a parent, and some of them have come up to me this year, that contributes to the decision to leave this community. Not only hurts us financially, in the sense of the actual school district loses money, but it hurts us in terms of the value of this community. Now, people love to talk about property values. It is absolutely true that some people come to this community and they stare at the water and they couldn't care less about what happens in the schools. Okay? And their waterfront properties will be maintained simply because that's a unique aspect and people will come to the water. But the vast majority of this community does not live on the water. The vast majority of this community will suffer greatly by the fact that the school system is eroded by these cuts. I can't tell you, if I'm lucky enough to be on the school committee on April 4th, what kind of reaction a school committee is going to have to these cuts. I know it's not going to be a unified reaction, because some of us believe that extra is not extra and it's part of the total experience. Others of us believe that one teacher cut is one too many, and anything at all besides cutting a teacher is the right thing to do, and everything in between. All I can tell you is we will probably be unified in the sense that this is a tragedy.
Comments from any members? Mr. Cronk?
I just have one suggestion. If you certainly take this to the town meeting and say you're going to remove the sports, I'll bet you get a lot of support out there. I hate to say that, but
It's gotta be in the mix. It's got to be in the mix,
you know, it's
in my opinion.
we need to get this information out to the public. They just need to know this. I don't know how better to stress it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just one more thing. Some people will look at things like the instructional leader program, which we spent 2 years working on to decide this was a valuable investment, and they will see that as an extra. Here's why I pray that people will not view it that way. We have been watching the results of the students of Wareham Public Schools, well, myself for 7 years, for Cliff longer, and for Bob in the back, decades.
Dirt. Longer than dirt.
He rode a horse to work.
There is no question in my mind that our below-average results will, in fact, not only not improve, but may get worse as a result of these cuts. There is no question in my mind that this investment in the support of our teachers and the accountability as well that this will bring to the teachers and the instruction in the classroom is absolutely critical for the results of this community to get to state average and hopefully beyond. That is, as the advertisement goes, priceless.
Crystal, do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Dr. Dennis does have an appointment.
I just have, just clarification, the, TA's number 26074370, that was level funded?
No.
Does that meet your requirements, or?
No, this is the needs based on this side, or you're looking at that paper. Okay. The TA's number was the 25,140,794. That was 250,000 below level funded.
All right, thank you, you corrected, it's 25, you're right, 25, thank
250
you.
below?
But
Yes.
you actually need, just for clarification, for level funded, you need 26,074, is that what you're saying?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. Level funded is on this page, 25,390,794.
Was last year's number? Oh,
Yes.
This was last year's number.
Yeah, FY12.
So,
I'm looking, I'm sorry, on the
Yep.
tall one at the
Yep.
bottom, left-hand,
That's all.
second to the bottom,
First-
under
first
net
column.
school spending, 25,390,794.
all right, thank you.
$250,000.
It's a $250,000 difference.
Mr. Chairman?
Do we have any, I'm sorry, do we have any more questions for Dr. Levinovitz? Dr. Levinovitz?
Would you like to?
Unless you would like him to stay.
I don't think you can.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
already.
That's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Do you want to wait and talk about non-med transportation?
Yes, I think we will go over the 5 articles and vote on them tonight. Because I agree with that, but I have the Spinney
I
and,
understand.
I have 2 articles that I would like to address first, because we want to give you all the time you need. I don't want to rush you through because other people are in line. You're very critical to us.
Thank you. We stay on? No, we're not done, that's the point.
I'll stay as long as you want.
Then I won't adjourn the meeting, that's my point. Okay, we'll just recess. So the meeting is recessed.
article that I have on the list has to do with the vocational. Do you want us to vote on that tonight, or do you want us to?
I would want to vote on that tonight with them here.
No, you don't want to vote on the minority.
We brought special projectiles for
Yes.
All right, in that case, I will hold that vote to next
There-
week. I will hold the consideration of article 10 until.
No, we have stuff to say on it.
All right, Article 10,
can I just say
too late,
something
you
about
said no. Too late, you said no. You had an opportunity.
Okay, that's fine.
What's Article 10?
Hold on a second. There's no reason.
Water pollution.
We still want to do this, I think, have Mr. Farley. Article 7 is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $2,595,519.00 as its share of the operating and capital costs of the Upper Cape Regional Vocational Technical High School District for the fiscal year July 1, 2012 through June 30, 2013, or to do or act in any manner relative thereto. I need a motion for favorable action. Mr. Castillo, second. Mr. Camerano. I'm gonna let the school, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just, for discussion purposes only, before we get in a long, drawn-out debate, we have 4 towns that this crazy formula that we're married to. Even if we vote it down, we're gonna get stuck with it. Is it right? Probably not at this time, it isn't right. However, I just think that we have to look at the article the way it is and the way the formula is written, and we should have had Mr. Farr in to speak to us, and
We will still, I'm still planning to have them.
Okay.
The question is scheduling.
but we shouldn't be
Okay,
voting on, we shouldn't be voting on it unless we are, I'd like to make a motion that we table this article.
I would prefer not to table it until we hear from the school committee, and then we can bring it off the table when Mr. Farr comes in.
Okay,
I don't want to have them to come back a second time. So
that's
if
it.
you- please let them speak so that.
All right.
others-
They're
okay?
gonna answer for me.
With respect to Upper Cape, we think they perform a valuable service to our students. I have, and I think I speak for the whole committee, I've never heard a dissenting word with respect to that. But I do want to point out, since this is a finance committee, the fact that the compounded annual growth rate for Upper Cape, for what they are charging us, for the last 12 years, so there's a real trend here, is 4.9% annual growth rate. In addition to that, the number of students that they are taking, educating, has actually gone down since 2001. People think that it's gone up. Well, it actually was up, it went down, and now it's back up again, but has not reached where it was 12 years ago. And yet, despite that, it's higher. And in fact, if you do a compounded annual growth rate associated with a per student, which is, in my mind, the most relevant way of looking at it, it's now 5.9%. So this is off the charts. And my recommendation is that regardless, I mean, you may want to, for prudence reasons, to allocate the amount that they've asked for because you don't think you'll get the cooperation from the other towns to push back. But to allow them to continue to accelerate at that level on a per student basis while you're being forced to do such draconian cuts to a system that takes all comers as compared to Upper Cape that screens based on academic performance, behavior, and other factors, I think is just a disservice to the town. But so those are the numbers associated with Upper Cape. And to be fair, we are at 1.8% on an annual basis and 3.5% on a per student basis. So 1.8, 3.5, 4.9, 5.9 are the two comparable numbers if you want to compare the two systems.
Mr. McDonald.
Okay, so then, I think you may have answered my question, but let's try it to make sure. the number of students that come out of the Wareham, town of Wareham,
Correct,
go to the cave,
yes,
has dropped.
since 2012. It hasn't-
2012.
Since 2001. It was up, it went down, and then it's starting to come back up, but it has not reached the level that it was at in 2001.
And yet they've had a steady increase in their
Correct.
cost. So we've been, in my theory, my way of looking at that, is we've actually, it's possible that we funded students that weren't coming from Wareham to a certain degree with that.
Oh, I mean, they're all Wareham
Well,
students.
by the way,
because their per pupil is very high.
I can give you those precise numbers. I'm sorry, it was 2003, so it's a decade. 243 students in 2003, 215 students in 2012.
I'm sorry, Dr. Silva? Dr. Silva, speak.
I just like to just build on what Jeff said, and the school committee knows that this has been a thorn on my side for quite some time. It's not because I don't believe in technical education, because I do. But I think that you have to look at this thing from an equitable perspective, and there hasn't been equity for many, many years now. You know, when we're talking about educating our children, all right, and we have all kinds of different ways in which we educate our children. We have specialized schools here, we have an alternative school, and we have Upper Cape. These are all ways in which we commit to educating our kids. But when you compare Wareham Public Schools with Upper Cape, there's not equity. And I think that at some point in time, I agree with Mrs. Bronk that says, yeah, we may have to pay the bill anyways. But I also believe that if two communities go back to Upper Cape and says, no, we're not going to continue this rate of increase anymore, we're not going to do it anymore, then they have to go back and they have to regroup, and they just cannot continue to operate on almost a 5% increase annually. That is not equitable. Here we are on the eve of dismantling Wareham Public Schools, and we're going to reward them with a 5% increase. It just makes no sense, in my opinion.
All right.
On that figures you were talking about the decrease in students, but has the amount of students going to Wareham High also is the decrease the same, or what's the difference?
Right, that's why I calculated it two ways for both schools.
Okay.
Cost per student versus the compound annual growth of the cost per student and the compound annual growth just based on the amount that is approved at town meeting.
Upper Cape's enrollment has stayed steady, though. They're just getting more kids from other schools. I mean, from other towns.
You were saying that Wareham students decreased, but has our enrollment decreased? You know, is that?
Yes, it has.
Yes, it has.
Yes, it has.
So is that percentage comparable?
I would say that we've got the kids to give them.
I can give you the precise numbers. I'm not sure exactly how to answer your question. Our enrollment in 2003 was 3,489, and we were sending 243 students to Upper Cape.
Okay.
For 2012, none of this, by the way, includes 2013, the budget we're discussing, because those numbers aren't fixed yet.
Okay.
Certainly on per student. So we're at $29.96 now, and they're at 215. So I just did the math. So to put it in numbers that may be even more meaningful, in 2003 we were spending, now you can calculate this number any way you like, but I'm just taking the number that we approve at town meeting and dividing it by the number of children we report to the state. But you can calculate it many different ways. We were at $6,243. Okay? They were at $6,574. Pretty darn close, right? Pretty darn close. For 2012, based on the number of students and the number of dollars approved by town meeting, we were at $8,475, and they're at $11,047. So you can see how the spread has just gone like that
Big difference.
over the last 10 years.
That's the compound, 5% versus 1%.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly what Mr. Paulson?
Thank you.
We have two members, they have a school committee. And we have two people within Wareham who are on that school committee.
Mm-hmm.
We should bring them in my opinion. Let them explain
It
what's
stole
going on.
my thunder. I would fully agree. I think we should ask them to come in with Mr. Farr and speak with us. I think it's, they've never met you before, have they?
Yes, they have.
Yes,
They have? Because we were here last year. So we should have
And they're good people and happy to come.
We should have them in as well.
The one thing that I'd say about this is, I agree that sometimes we feel that our hands are tied when it comes to this situation where, there are 4 other towns that have to vote for this. But I know it was last year, it seemed like all 5 towns approved it. And I feel like that this is the time that we just have to say enough is enough. We just can't. And I think that it does send a strong message by just basically stating the differences between the two and just how, I'm sorry, I'll just say, unfair it is to the Wareham children that this continues to happen. But I feel like there's some sort of advocacy that has to go on with some of these other towns, just saying, I believe that Upper Cape provides a quality service to the children, but they also get the best children. Meaning the most high-performing children are the ones with less behavioral issues because they have a system that they go through that they don't take all children. And I just feel that this is the time to advocate as much as we can to the other towns, saying it's time for them to go back and cut a little bit more because the rest of the towns and the rest of the schools, that's exactly what they've been asked to do.
I just skipped.
You got skip.
I was looking for that.
We saw you.
All right, for the sake of peace, Mrs. Cthulhu.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Make it quick, will you?
We're really going to table this. We should just
Well,
make sure it's this
well,
then.
first thing was, I got approached by a mother here in town, and, asking about Upper Cape. And there's a terrible misconception with people not understanding what Upper Cape is about. And their comment to me was, I thought it was like an alternative. If you couldn't make it through Wareham High School, it was a place to go and get a trade, okay? So they misunderstand, yeah, and I think a lot of people think that that's what it is, where you go to regular high school to go to college, but if you choose to go to a trade, then you go to a trade school, not understanding the stipulations that are required to get into Upper Cape. My other question was, she had also asked me about Bristol Aggie. Okay. Now, do we have a contract with Bristol Aggie for certain? Do you have any idea what kind of money we're paying them?
Almost twice what Upper Cape is charging.
Really?
Yes.
Could you provide us with that number at some point?
I think I'm sorry because I think if Dr. Rabinovich was
Yeah,
here,
he
he could
knows.
give you that
And I
precise
didn't
number.
remember the budget. It's in there.
And actually, let me take back the almost twice because you always get in trouble when you do cost per student. I believe the cost is approaching $20,000 per student,
Okay.
but
Plus transportation too, right?
plus transportation. Yes. So whatever it is, but that's the round numbers. It may be 18, something like that.
But my other question is, if we're talking about, getting is it 5 towns, is it what it's 5 towns? Together and saying, we've had enough, this is it, is there an alternative? Is there better bang for our buck at say, New Bedford or something that we could contract and get our children
We are
the
in
same
that
education?
consortium, and there's nothing we can do about it.
There's nothing we can do about that.
No, they would just have to do what we're doing,
It's
which
cut.
is cut.
Cut. Upper Cape would have to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, look, we're being level funded. Or let's use that as an example. We're being level funded. Well, that means we gotta cut 6% out of our budget.
It's not needs-based anymore in this world. No more needs-based. It's you need to do the bare minimum, and even less than that.
I got one final thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm hogging the time. I know this isn't your budget, and maybe you can't answer this, but under transportation, because that's always a subject that's just fun, it says provided by district. Do we provide partial transportation to Upper Cape?
No, they provide transportation, but unlike Wareham, our reimbursement for transportation ended about 2005, and that was $250,000 to the town. They get transportation reimbursement.
Because they're clobbering.
Yes, because they're pulling students
The
from a
region.
region.
Okay, so this is nothing to do with us providing them any
Correct.
transportation. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Trudell, I'd like you, since we were in tables, I'd like to preview.
Right.
Go ahead.
I'd like to thank Mr. Sweat for providing those statistical things. Those of us like to see numbers go by us with percentage signs and dollar signs, so that was most helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
The problem that I see with the Upper Cape is a divide and conquer, and we're on the end of the voting list. I'll give you an example. Last year, they needed to put in $3 million worth of window improvements over 10 time it came to the town, it was a moot question. So each year now, and it's in their budget, is a special assessment. We pay basically $30,000 a year over the next 10 years to cover our share of those loans. It's kind of frustrating when you're sitting there on capital planning looking at this and somebody says, oh, by the way, it's a $30,000 bill and I'm trying to find money for school windows, library windows, or a piece of equipment, and there's somebody reaches in and just says, oh, by the way, we're part of your assessment, but that's going into our capital plan for $30,000 a year. That's very frustrating. And it's kind of like seeing somebody reach into my capital planning wallet and take money out of it. And I really don't like that. And my discussion.
I just want to be clear, because the last thing I would want to be perceived as doing is bashing Upper Cape.
Absolutely.
That is the antithesis of what I'm trying to get across. I think they do a fine job.
Yes, they do.
If Kevin was here, I would compliment him on the job he does for our 215 or 16 students. It is simply the fact that I think, especially because we take all comers, I think we're doing a pretty good job. We're being asked to cut dramatically, and I don't think they should avoid that pain.
Just real quick, that other school you're talking about, how many students do we send to them, Joe?
Which schools? Oh, very few.
I think 6 or 7.
Yeah, it's less than one hand, maybe, something.
Thank you, that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
Mr. Brock, I'll entertain your motion to the table. Seconded by Mr. Trudell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're sending an invitation.
Yes.
All right, I'll have to talk to the town administrator, we'll have to ask for him, and then also the two gentlemen. The two gentlemen that are on
Mr. Fichtenmeyer and I'm blanking on the other gentleman.
Is it Kent's Welding? Kent?
That sounds right.
Kent's Welding?
Yes.
What's his last name?
It's Kent's Welding.
Nick Williams?
the, all right, I'll try to see if I can get one.
Nick Williams.
Yes, you're right.
Kent McWilliams.
All right, I'll try to make arrangements for them both to be here next week along with Mr. Farr, if we can get him here. I will also tell you that what surprises me often, I keep telling you, I keep getting the Bourne paper because I live in Buzzards Bay. They started talking to Upper Cape like 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, with their reps, et cetera, and they actually discussed everything with Upper Cape before they ever took a vote. You know, I'm not talking about the town, but their members took a vote as part of the school committee. And I think that's probably what's missing on our side, is that we really don't talk to everybody until it's too late.
Who was the board?
Right.
I'm sorry.
Pardon?
Question? Who was on the contingent that went and talked to them for more? Was it?
It was the board, they talked to the finance committee and the board of selectmen. They came in for a joint meeting and explained everything, and the reps were there and Mr. Farr was there. And like I said, this was a couple of months ago, and as a matter of fact, I believe I found out the numbers for Wareham before you found them out, because it was in the Wareham paper. They met Wednesday, Thursday morning, the numbers were in the paper. And, you know, we're also in the situation where Falmouth, if it's 100,000, we're 220,000. The others are much less in their increases because they only added like one student. So they were an easy 3 votes. And that's another thing that we need, if we're gonna go back and make a protest, in any way, or try to get a partner, it's gonna have to be whoever else is getting the big hit. Because, I mean, I'm looking at 100 and 200, and somebody else coming in, I think Bourne got hit for 30,000. That's a tough decision for them. It's a no decision.
Or maybe weighted voting.
Rumor has it
well, it is weighted voting.
Rumor has
Well,
it that
I believe it is weighted. Is it weighted or
There's a
not?
complicated formula in terms of how much we get charged, but I don't think there's any weighted voting.
I thought it was 2, 2, 2, and 1 was the count. I think Marion had one less person or something. Somebody told me, I don't know.
Oh, you're talking about the school committee?
The
No,
school
but in terms of approval by the towns of the
Okay.
budget, it's not weighted. So the person that has 10 students gets 1 vote, and the person the town that has 10 students gets one vote, and we have 215 and we get 1 vote.
We get one vote.
rumor has it that there's a town down in Cape that's not real happy with Upper Cape either.
I have a sneaky suspicion I know who it is. I bet their name begins with an F.
It is.
That aren't very
All
happy.
right, what else?
All right, so I'll make arrangements on all that. Next article would be Article 18. Which is going to be to see if the town will vote to appropriate and authorize the treasurer with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to borrow some money contingent upon approval of the Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion for the purpose of funding the purchase of new or used vehicles for the school transportation department or take any action relative thereto. Chair, I'll entertain a motion for favorable action.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. McDonald,
Second.
second Mrs. Cattouli. Discussion? I think you've said so much.
I'll very briefly give you Plan A, B, and C. Plan A was to take about $1.5 million and change as an operating budget. Use that, and that would have allowed us to operate the fleet for a year. Take the surplus generated by the revolver, plus the whatever 100,000 or so from the meals tax, which we were promised a long time ago, plus whatever capital planning was able to fund, and use all those monies to get into a replacement plan. That was Plan A. That's no longer viable for reasons that I don't need to go into. Plan B is what you see before you, which is to say we take the surplus of the revolver plus a significantly lowered operating budget, $1.3 million and change, and that would give us a budget for operating the department that would not require us to come back to you, but it would use up the surplus in the revolver. And then we would use the debt exclusion money, and we thought we'd have some of the meals tax for Plan B up until a short time ago, but that seems to have disappeared. So we'll probably end up with more used than new, but whatever, that's Plan B. Plan C, just to be clear, is if only necessary if the debt exclusion does not pass. If Plan B does not work because of the debt exclusion failure, Plan C would be to use the revolver and the operating budget to fund a department that is properly funded, and then we would cut services and I suspect it's do fees in a combination that would result in about $200,000 of net surplus, either by spending less or generating fees. The fees would roll into the revolver. The cutting services, 7 through 12, would result in lower operating costs, so the less would have to be taken out of the revolver to support the operating budget. That would generate about $200,000, which is enough to maintain a fleet that is about twice as old as we think is appropriate. In other words, we would end up with an average age of a bus of being about 10 years instead of 5 years. Is this a viable plan?
No.
It's the only plan. I mean, because absent any funding and the legal obligation to provide service K to 6, we have to somehow come up with a plan, and that is literally the only plan. Now, I'll say one more thing about this Plan C. You can talk about fees and what level they should be at any way you want to. But the problem with fees is the higher they go, the fewer the people pay them. So there is a point at which, you might as well stop charging more because all you're doing is driving away your customers. So it's the belief that probably somewhere around $100 a year would keep people using the buses rather than carpooling, walking, biking. I know that would be lovely in some ways, but we need more sidewalks and when there are safety issues and all that sort of thing. But the bottom line is we don't think that we can generate more than about $200,000 in either reduced costs or fees. And that's why Plan C is what it is. Could we, as some towns do, charge $475 per year per child? That's the highest I've seen. Sure, we could do that. Anybody want to bet how many of our 1,100 or so eligible students, meaning, I'm sorry, it would be 1,100 if we didn't cut services, but if you're not going to provide the service, you can't charge the fee. So it actually drops down to about 600 and some children. $475 per child, somehow I don't think that 600 children are going to pay that $475. So the number I want you to keep in your mind is about 200,000, which is about half of what we need, which doubles the age of the fleet.
Oh, before we get into that too, because I had a conversation with somebody today about what Plan C means, particularly in the minded school. I said, you know, if you take the buses, which will have to drop off students, and you take the parents who are now dropping off their students because they can't afford the $475, and you take the children that are bicycling on their way, and you have the children who are walking because they're under 2 miles, and you roll them all up together in one driveway, and you damn well better have an adequate amount of police over time. Mr. McDonald?
Fun. You know, I was going to tell a joke, but I decided it's not really funny at this time.
I have a projectile here.
Now this is the one that, you know, the old joke about you know, someone being in another world and you're up here in a cesspool and someone's firing flamethrower at you, and you got your choice of standing on your head and getting your feet burnt, or, you know, this is where we're at. It's not a good situation, and I'm a little frustrated by this because this $360,000 gets you started.
Yes, and as I said at the last school committee meeting, it would be disingenuous, which is why in this explanation our superintendent has put the last sentence. This is the beginning of a replacement plan which voters may approve or disapprove each year. So the $490 for 5 years is a rolling $490, which ultimately will end up with being about $25, $24 a year for the fleet replacement plan.
Oh, so if we continued with this debt exclusion for 5 years, that's going to give us the $360,000, correct?
No, that'll give us. Oh, sorry, that'll give us the $360,000 every year.
Every year.
Ah,
Every
well,
year for 5 years.
Annually, yeah.
It's a rolling. Now you could argue that maybe it should be an override since there's no plan for ever not having it. The advantage, the appropriateness of the capital of the debt exclusion is the fact that it is clearly capital because it has a useful life way beyond 5 years and it's expensive. And the advantage to the taxpayers is that at any time they can say, enough, don't want to do it anymore, and they don't have to pass an underride.
I guess when you look at this, the way that it's written, you're doing $360,000. That's the amount you're borrowing, but that's not the amount you're borrowing. Because now you're saying I'm borrowing $360,000, but I'm financing it over 5 years, and that's not what you're trying to convey right now.
You're gonna borrow $360,000 each year.
Every year.
Right,
For 5 years.
You gotta be, and you've done it a lot longer than I have, and I respect that. But if you lay this out there like that, someone's gonna say, wait a minute, they're trying to backdoor us. You need to put 360,000 times 5 out there and let people know what's going on, because
No,
They're gonna have to approve this every year.
1 year.
This is still 1 year.
The article's written for 1 year, for a purchase that'll be paid over 5 years, but what they are questioning you on is next year, they have to come back with another article.
because that's what I was trying to say.
Yes.
Right, because they need to replace.
I
not
agree with
5,
you
but
completely,
3.2.
and I assure you, if I'm lucky enough to be still functioning.
Oh yeah, it's gotta come back next year.
Right,
That will be-
5 versus
okay.
3.
That will be said on town meeting floor, which is why I asked the superintendent to put that last sentence in.
Correct.
It would be disingenuous to suggest that this isn't an ongoing replacement plan. And the only good news is that at the end of your 5th year, you at least can say, okay, is this it? In other words, is the 6th year going to keep adding to it? No, it's a 5-year plan, a rolling 5-year plan, and think of it as approximately $25 a year once the rolling is fully implemented.
Well, that's the confusion that I have, because in reality, you're for 5 years, we're financing 300 now don't get me started on the rest of it. Just if we pass a debt exclusion, it's for $360,000 over 5 years, and it amounts to this amount. So we're paying for 5 years for this year's.
Correct.
And therein lies the problem for me, because we're getting a start, and I understand that you gotta have a start somewhere, but the problem is, and what I've noticed since I've been around, we get starts and then we forget all about it. You know, we have to be able to come up, this is why it's so important that we have to have a better plan than this to do the buses.
I agree.
So,
Please. There is no one that agrees more with you than I do on this committee. The problem is this. We have been working in a committee atmosphere for over a year. And we have studied this and studied this and studied this. There has been requests for information. It's been given. All the books are open. Everything is available there. We continue debate on whether this is going to continue, that the town is going to continue to run a fleet, or if we should outsource it. I believe that should continue. We should still look at both. But looking at it doesn't solve the problem right now. And this is what I said when we had our joint committee meeting, that what this committee is doing is we're trying to come up with a solution right now, which is a 1-year debt exclusion, so then we can get buses in there, so then we don't have an emergency situation going into next year. But this committee, and absolutely, I'll speak for myself on this one, will be at the table every single time and have as much information available as possible, do whatever studies is needed to actually come to the long-term solution to this. But we cannot put this off any longer. This is the article that needs to pass, so then we have a safe, an effective, just a fleet that we actually can run the transportation going into next year.
do I get to ask one more and then
No,
let them answer?
Dr. Silverstein, please.
Okay.
Well, it was, it's kind of what she says, if I can build just on a couple of things. Well, first of all, talking about it is, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, there is no Plan C. It just doesn't make any sense. Plan C makes no sense to me. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no Plan C. But the thing of it is there is this thought in town that if we don't have our own bus fleet, that somehow or other the bill goes away. The bill doesn't go away. You're always going to have to be saddled with the responsibility of transporting students to school, whether it be 1 through 6, whatever the case may be. The bill doesn't go away. And I think that's the message that we haven't done a good enough job of getting out there, that no matter how you slice the cake, no matter how you look at it, what your perspective is, whether you want to keep it in-house or privatize it, the bill doesn't go away.
Just a point of information, and keep this in mind, what we're talking about, most of the miles are special education and homeless miles, required by law.
That was my question, thank you.
Mr. Castillo?
I understand what Mr. McDonald was getting to, and Dr. Sibu, you almost got there.
I almost got there.
Yeah.
I'll try harder next time.
It's the compounded issue that we want the public to understand, okay? And I love this little chart that says, it's $360,000 and it's gonna cost me $4.90 for this year. We understand that we're only asking for this year, and that you want the people to understand that, yeah, we will be coming back for you next year, and we want another $360,000. So now my $490, somebody want to double it and do my math for me? Whatever we're saying is that
Oh, come on.
20, but I understand, 5 years down the line, it's gonna be $25.
Right.
Okay? That's what we want the public to understand, that this is a start of a plan. And yeah, I hope everybody keeps looking at other options and deciding, do we wanna stay in this business or we don't? But we want the public to understand that this is a start of it now, that's not the end of it, that there may be additional costs going forward, and what those mean compounded over the 5 years.
Mr. Paulson?
I wish I'd have brought the exhibit, and Barry sent me this about maybe 2 or 3 months ago, but it showed the ages of the buses by year, and then it showed which had passed inspection. And as I recall, 3 of the 5 oldest buses, which I would presume would be the ones that you might replace. I mean, that's, well,
We'll replace the least valuable.
well, I was thinking, let me, if I might finish, I was thinking that you'd replace the 3 of the 5 oldest, but they all passed. So I'm thinking to myself as I read that, and I may have misinterpreted it based on your reaction there, was, gee, if the older buses are okay, why don't we keep using them? They are, they passed inspection. There seems to be no real problem with them. So it's my observation and a question both.
The short answer is, and I don't pretend any special expertise in terms of maintaining buses, but the short answer is, if you have a fleet of 1,000 buses, you know, a large cohort, statistically speaking, you know, some buses, the oldest buses will be the ones you get rid of. But you might end up with the opposite of a lemon. I'm not sure what the opposite of a lemon is. You might end up with a great bus, you know, a great bus that happens to be in good shape at the end of 10 years, or maybe even 15 years. We've all had cars like that. I think my father was an expert in maintaining them. The bottom line is, when you have 50, probably the oldest ones will be the ones you get rid of. But you'll get rid of the ones that are costing you the most to maintain, like the ones we just had to replace engines on.
But that is just the point I'm driving at. It's the point I've tried to make with Barry from time to time, in fact, frequently, that I sit here and I have, and nobody on this committee, to the best of my knowledge, has any really good sense as to what kind of maintenance is going on with these various buses, as to exactly what might be done. And I'll give you an example that you may say, well, that's a silly example. Flying around up there right now are 747s that are 30, 40 years old, and they replace the engines, they replace the carpet, they replace the lighting, but they don't replace the bodies. Now, I understand that we have got a different environment out here with the wind and the snow and the ice. I get all that. But the point I'm trying to get to here, and perhaps poorly, and I apologize for being too woody on this, is there any way that we can maintain these buses and keep them even though they're 10, 11, 12 years old? And I get back to the 3 of the 5 buses that are over 11 years old that are passing inspection.
As long as you're sitting down, I'm going to shock you. Let me agree with you, okay? Because with due respect to my colleague and friend, Dr. Sylvia, I actually think Plan C is more than just a theory, okay? I think we have to anticipate the fact that this may not be approved, and since we have a legal obligation, Plan C may be what we have to implement. We just have no choice. So we will literally end up with that very situation, a fleet that averages 10 years of age, which means some are going to be a lot older than 10, and we're going to have to do a great job maintaining them, because the alternative is to literally be out of compliance with the law, or privatizing and handing the FinCom in the town a bill that is, you know, well, in this case, since we're not investing and the depreciation number means nothing, it would literally be $1 million more than we're spending now.
Once those undercarriages are gone, throw it away. Once the undercarriages are gone, throw it away.
I don't want to pretend any expertise in that area, but I think Plan C is something that the town expects us to have a Plan C. Whether it will work, I will not sit here and tell you Plan C will work, that 5 years from now we'll say, gee, having a fleet that averages 10 years in age, et cetera, et cetera. More importantly, I don't know what only providing service for K to 6 and ignoring the 7 through 12, I don't know the impact on our schools, our parents, and the extra burden of getting their kids to school, and whether absenteeism and truancy and tardiness all rise dramatically. I don't know the answers to those questions. I'm afraid to speculate as to what the answers to those questions will be.
If I can summarize what you presented
Yes.
all this time, though, is that there's an option A, which we don't feel in any way is viable.
No longer viable.
It's no longer viable.
Correct.
So that leaves us only with B and C.
By the way, the biggest reason it's no longer viable is the fact that the revolver needs to support the operating budget.
Which we know it's
It
not.
now has to, because we have officially voted as a school committee to reduce it to the 1.3 that the town administrator said was all he could afford.
Okay, so option A is not viable. So it's a choice between B, which is this article, or C, which is a very draconian plan, but has to be more than likely implemented if this article does not pass.
Yes, but with due respect to my two colleagues here, they haven't voted on it.
Oh, I understand that, but that is the reality of it. It's either
Yes.
we either buy buses or we don't buy them, and each brings a course of action.
Correct.
All right, and that's what we're being asked to decide. We say, do we support this? Or we don't support it? And do we support it to go to the ballot? or not. And that's, I'm gonna ask that I'm going to ask that the favorable motion be withdrawn, because I'd like to reword it. Usually,
There's someone behind you that wanted to speak, is that okay?
depends on who it is.
Nah.
No. Yes, Tom?
Just a question on the debt exclusion. $360,000 this year, and it will take 5 years to pay off that $360,000?
If you
Yeah.
decide.
Well, we've been told by the,
five-year.
we've been told by the treasurer collector that that's a reasonable schedule, and that produces the $4.90 per year.
Okay, so now you do that, and at the end of that year, you've got 400 and, let's call it $5, okay? There's $5. Next year, you come to us with another $360,000.
Yes, that's what we
For
said.
5 years.
Yes.
That's $5. So we've paid 5, now we're paying the next 5 plus the 5 here.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's more than $28 at the end, because you're
No,
adding these things
No.
Some will go offline.
it's literally just adding 490 minus, there may be some inflation, but let's call it 5, okay?
$5.
It's literally adding 5 times for 5 years, and that's it.
Oh, no, I realize that, but now when you ask next year for the $360,000, that's another $360 for another 5 years,
That's correct. So you're on a rolling 5-year schedule.
right?
That's $25.
You're on a rolling 5-year schedule for debt,
Right.
but you're on an infinite, so to speak, schedule of debt
Debt
exclusions,
exclusion.
right? But the advantage is that at the end of the 5th year, the first one you put in is now expired,
Right.
and you start a new one, so the total is about $25.
But for
And
that
that's gonna
first
go
one,
on and on and on.
Excuse me?
for the first debt exclusion that you did 5 years ago, not for the other 4 that came along after.
No, that's not, if you're saying what I think you are, that's incorrect.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get
It's,
straight on.
it's think of it as this way, it's $5 year 1,
Right,
it's $10 year 2,
right.
it's $15 year 3, $20 year 4, $25 year 5. Now, the reason it's not gonna go to 30, because you're adding $5, is because the first one just fell off.
Just fell off.
Tony, I have a schedule that I can show you, I've actually mapped that
I
out.
think it's how many
Okay.
buses can you
It
get to
comes up,
that?
and each year you add so much, and then after that.
Depends on whether the newer
It's in
years afford them.
perpetuity unless they vote not to do debt exclusion.
Okay, because it just
Yeah,
sounds
we
to me like
anticipate
it's
they'll be used
exactly
in some cases.
Yeah.
In some cases, they'll be vans at far less
Go
expense.
ahead, go ahead, original motion.
Tony, did that make sense?
I
The
think
original
I
motion
understand
was,
what you're saying. I think I've got this. I'm just gonna have to kind of-
Larry, would you?
I know.
I don't think I have it.
No, would you withdraw your original motion for favorable action?
I withdraw my
And
motion.
the second one?
I will withdraw my second.
And the second is withdrawn, yes. Yes, I would like the motion to be worded, that the committee, I'd like a motion for favorable action to place this article on a ballot if approved by town meeting.
So moved.
Pardon?
Can we do that?
Wait a
Oh, I
minute.
can, sure we can.
Hold on, you'd like a motion to what?
To, okay, what did I say?
Favorable action to be placed approved by town
If
meeting.
approved by town meeting.
Frank, the moderator has her hand
I
raised.
think what, the reason this is on here, Frank, is because you're voting to authorize the borrowing. You're not authorizing the placement on an election ballot. That only can come from the selectmen. So the reason it's in here, from my understanding, if I understand it correctly, and I will double check with council, it's on the warrant only to authorize the borrowing, because then if it goes to the ballot and gets passed, you have had to authorize the borrowing.
I know we have to go to the selectmen, can I reword it so that there were recommendations to the
You
selectmen?
can put it in your recommendation, but the only one that can put it on a ballot would be the board of
Oh, I know
selectmen.
that, we're not debating that. The thing is,
But you still have to take a vote on the authorization to borrow. That's the article before you is the authorization. That's why it's on the warrant. Your only authorization, the borrowing, in the event it does go on the ballot, you have to have that authorization so that when it does pass, if it does pass, you have the authorization to borrow. So that's why it's on the warrant. It doesn't have anything at all to do whether or not it goes on a ballot.
I think we have to vote favorable or not favorable. I mean, we have to do that on this and then make a recommendation in our explanation.
I mean, you certainly could make a recommendation, you know, and further, we recommend that the selectmen place
Exactly.
this on the ballot.
Yeah, I don't think we have a choice here.
Yeah.
I'm in a, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm in a real dilemma here. Because having listened to the school, I know how desperate their situation is. On the other hand, I sit on capital planning and I know how desperate our situation is on the town side. And I know that sooner or later, town's gonna have to belly up because we're gonna run out of options. So I find myself in a situation where I understand the school situation and I understand the town situation. What the school's going through now is probably about a year or 2 years before what the town's gonna have to look at. We're starting down a road, if I will, of heroin addiction. If I'm a seller, it's a great deal, but if I'm a user, it's not so good. And debt exclusions, Proposition 2.5, are options I don't have as a homeowner. When I run out of money at home, and my roof needs repair, I have to go see if I can find credit. But all that credit does is buy me time. Point that I make is, somehow, government has got to find a way to live within its means. We have no checks and controls on health care. We have very little checks and controls on the cost of utilities. As we pointed out 5 years ago, it does not matter what we do. Our increase of expenses like this, and our ability to generate revenue was like this. We knew we'd come to a brick wall sooner or later. We're arriving at that brick wall. How do I vote when I know it's not just the school that I'm looking at, I'm also looking at the town. The brick wall is running towards us. And if you think that putting money into it helps, we put a mall online, and for 2 years previously, we spent $1 million that we didn't have. We got rid of school funding, and it saved us $1 million. And out of that $1 million, I saw $64,000 come to capital. And for me, this is a really bad situation. I can favor putting this on the ballot and let the community decide.
But it automatically has to go on the ballot. This is an exclusion.
I mean,
Mrs. Frank.
I mean, come on. The chief got up there and went for safety, safety, safety. What is more important than the safety of our children? Now, I don't have children in the school system anymore either, but darn, we've got to protect these children, and we have put this off and put it off, and the can has come to the end of being kicked. It's more important than maintaining some buildings, in my opinion. We have a responsibility to the children of this town, and this is a no-brainer. I mean, we haven't done anything. It's a safety issue. I say we put it on for favorable action, and we take our vote and let it go as it is.
In light of the comments by the town moderator as well, since it's not, as she says, it is a authorization to borrow, and we surely have the right with our recommendations to state both sides.
Okay. Exactly.
But that also means that people who might support putting it on the ballot would wind up voting unfavorably against this authorization. And I think some people feel very strongly to go to the ballot, but would hesitate to vote in favor of the debt exclusion. That's the problem. But Okay, no matter what the moderator has said, I'll accept the motion for favorable action.
So moved.
The second, and second, Mrs. Scrivili. Any discussion of this current motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
That'd be, 5-1.
What do we have? Is it? I'm sorry.
5-1-0. We don't- we don't
It
know.
was painful.
Dominic got it, yeah.
Article 19 is to see if the town will vote to appropriate and authorize the treasurer with approval of the board of selectmen to borrow some money contingent upon the approval of Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion for the purpose of funding repairs to the Wareham High School gymnasium roof, including ancillary costs for taking any action relative thereto. Have a motion for favorable action.
So moved.
Second, Mr. McDonald. Discussion?
I think it speaks for itself.
The roof's leaking, we gotta fix it.
Is this the total cost? Or-
For the gyms only.
Just the gym.
Just the gym.
Okay, tell me the real story. How bad is the whole roof?
Well,
We don't need.
It's 48
I'm gonna catch you off. I kept Mr. Paulson off before. I'm gonna cut you off. All right, is there any other questions?
just as a footnote,
I can tell you 2
You're cut
words.
off too.
Pretty bad.
I have a motion, unless it's directed to the question, I'm not gonna walk, I wanna go home. In that case, please. Seeing no conversation to this address, this borrowing authorization. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
5-1-0. Article number
20.
page 20. To see if the town will vote to appropriate and authorize the treasurer with approval of the board of selectmen to borrow some of money contingent upon approval of the Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion for the purpose of funding the purchase of instructional materials for use in Wareham Public Schools and take any action relative thereto. Got any motion for favorable action?
So moved.
Second, Mrs. Scrivili seconded, Mrs. Brown. Discussion? Mr. Paulson?
I have a philosophical objection that just, or observation and objection that goes back many years, and that is to use debt to pay for the things that are operational in nature. I'm going to vote against this.
Well, I guess we
Any other discussion?
It was my understanding that this is the new software and books for the new required curriculum. Am I correct?
it is not replacement, it is new, correct.
Any further, do you want to explain that further in any way? Or
No, but I'll be happy to take questions. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. And I will say that the reason we have traditionally done this as an operating expense, but in fact it was this committee that convinced us it was appropriate to spread the costs over a number of years because they in fact last quite a number of years. And more importantly, this was a way to reduce the operating budget and hopefully get the money in a different way, which freed up more money for the town, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a compromise, but and hopefully a worthwhile one.
Well, to clarify that a little more, it was the suggestion of a member of the committee who attended the Mass Municipal Association Capital Planning Seminar, which was held the second day of the conference. A number of towns are doing this for both their computers and in a case where it is a whole new program and has not a replacement cycle, but is a very large amount that's been mandated to them that they have to make this particular purchase. What they look at is the life of the materials, much as a business would do when it came in with like new software, as you were mentioning. What's the life of the software? If the software, or what's the tax code say the life is? All right, and so it runs like 5 years. These textbooks, curriculums, being brand new in literacy and mathematics, I believe the estimate is 5 to 7 years. All right, so it fits with the bond, you know, it fits with how we could bond it, 5 to 7 years, actually 5 years. So I brought that recommendation back from Mass Municipal because the reason why other towns are doing it as well is rather than hitting one group, one set of students right up front, or 1 year on the tax bill up front, they're using what they like to call the fairness principle. If you're going to use it over 5 years, let people pay it over 5 years. The people that are going to actually use it, et cetera, the community that's going to use it. That's part of the whole reason to bring it back that way. Replacements of these same books going forward would not be capital items. They're expense items. So it's a little bit of change of policy, but it also provides us the opportunity that when something is mandated, we don't have to swallow $200,000 all at once. The computers are a little different story, right? There are it's new technology, it's new software in many cases, and it's absolutely necessary for the students to have. Otherwise, they have problems when they graduate from high school and go out into the workaday world and find out they've been using Windows 95, and there's this mystical thing now called Windows 7.
8 is coming this year.
It's
It's
already
coming
out
this
there.
year. So that's the reason why
Don't make it.
I brought this back to them, saying, think about it. And like I said, this is a practice that's been done in many communities in Massachusetts. But yeah, it was me. I
Good job.
had to pay my own way. Mr. McDonald?
I'm not asking you to promise me anything at this point. This is another one of those mandated things that went unfunded, correct? I mean, from an overall standpoint, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details, but this is something they're saying, you're going to change curriculum, and oh, by the way, we're not going to give you any money to do it. So, when I'm looking at these things, and this is not, all these relate somehow or another to the underfunding from the state level for our school, in my opinion. State and federal funding has dropped off. If we're going to, I'll keep talking till you get back, Bonnie. If we're going to make headway, we can't continue to talk about that. Yes, we're going to make some. We're going to take it on the chin as citizens, but somewhere along the line, we have got to approach the state and federal government on some level to get this money back. How are we going to do that, or are we just going to talk about it? Because if we're just going to talk about it, then we're going to keep doing this every year.
Let me, it may be worth,
Well, first off, we're going to be doing it every year. That's what this is. This is a new program. Oh, if they had a new program, say,
no, we're not gonna have that, this is not a every year thing.
These things are,
I understand that, but
are
this
well
is-
planned out.
No, you're missing my point. In the overall picture of the school, we're talking about different things, and probably some of this is coming from the mandates from the state and federal government. Not, and over a period of time, we've built up this deficit because of them. So I'm saying as we go forward, we're approving these debt exclusions, we're looking at them, but can we look at this from the standpoint that, how do we enforce them using the formula to get us more money? How do we go back against the state and federal government to get more money? If we're just gonna sit here and talk about, they're not giving us enough money, we gotta do
You
something.
do that by liability or litigation?
No, Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry,
Just-
lobbying or litigation?
there's a parallel plan that's going on. So there is, at the state
Right.
level, there is
That's my answer.
advocacy, there is advocacy going on at the state level, and if anybody wants to get involved at the state level, we can give you the information on how you can contact your congressmen and your senators and speak up on that. So there is work being done.
Yeah, as I said, it's lobbying or litigation.
Yeah, but I need to, in the spirit of candor, I just spent all yesterday morning on Beacon Hill. Our friends on Beacon Hill, people who used to be on school committees, who are now House Ways and Means. I think she was either the chair or the vice chair of House Ways and Means. Education committees, et cetera, et cetera. They spoke to all these school committee members. I can summarize in a few sentences what they said. They are not even going to, they have sent the adequacy study for Chapter 70 back to committee. Not going anywhere. Their excuse for it? Well, Desi said they were going to do something, so we'll wait for Desi to do it. We're spending more than twice as much on Medicaid, essentially, as we're spending on education. By the way, that's not just K-12. They're also talking college and universities in this state. More than twice as much. And education is, quote, controllable, because they can certainly turn off the spigot and say, towns, it's your problem. Whereas healthcare, it's mandates. They've got a law and they're taking care of people. The bottom line is we were told it ain't getting better, and it ain't getting better sooner even, and later is hard to figure. So I don't think I came away with zero optimism. And on top of that, there is a bill that is going to look at requiring people to stay in school until they're 18 years of age. All that's going to do is fill up our cooperative, which I suppose is a good thing in some ways. It's fill up our cooperative because there are a lot of kids who don't want to be in school, and trying to force them to stay in school is not possible. So we're going to have, and teachers are going to be miserable with kids who are, so they are, talk about insensitive to the problems of what's really going on in cities and towns. It's unbelievable. But I left with zero optimism that any funding or advocacy, which is going on, will have any impact, because even our friends in the legislature are saying, don't look at me.
Mr. Cameron.
But you know, getting back to what Larry said, you know, Larry, you said that, you know, we have to keep going back, you know, to the government, to the state, to get our money for this and that. It's still the town's problem.
Well, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, you know, just go to the state for every time.
Mr. Paulson?
It is absolutely impossible to get the state or the federal government ever help us again. Not going to happen, ever.
I think we already heard that.
When I was going back to the MMA meeting, and I was there for I knew of the different workshops. The state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has a $15 billion, not million, $1 billion obligation, unfunded liability for GASB 45, for OPEB, for employee benefits for retirees. It's got to be paid, and every year that goes by adds another $1 billion. This town has an $87 million obligation, and we're not trying to meet that. We never talk about it. Nobody talks about it. Some of us know about it, but the $15 billion, the state is very much aware of that. The people on these various committees, they know they have to start funding it. At the federal level, the number is $61 trillion. 61 trillion. There's no amount of growth that's going to, and there's no amount of money that's going to come from the federal government. We're on our own. That's it. Don't even think about going to the state. Don't even think about going to the federal government. There's only going to be cuts, 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 cuts. I know that sounds rather negative, but...
Now I'm going to go to a funeral so I can go get cheered up, okay?
The reality
Depends
is,
whose it is.
those of us who are older citizens, and remember Proposition, yeah, thank you. Proposition 2.5 was passed by homeowners because they couldn't control the way taxes were going. It was a desperate situation. But those of us who remember even the days before that recall one thing: unfunded mandates from the state. They're unending. They don't stop. The old phrase, when the legislature's in session, your dog and your heart are in danger, is true. But the reality is, when do we say no? When do we say, I can't implement this because I don't have any money? When do you finally say, I can't afford what you have just given to me? Give me an option here, state. Because all we're doing is continue to feed them. And you're right, Dick, there is going to be no hope. Because they're so far under they can't see up.
That's right. We've gone over the cliff.
Any further discussion on this article? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
It's 4-3.
What was the vote, I'm sorry?
4-3,
Thank you.
favorable. Next article is Article 21, which is to see if the town will vote to accept general laws, Chapter 71, Section 71F, authorize the school committee to use a revolving fund to be credited with all monies received by the school committee as tuition payments for non-resident students. Receipts held in such account may be expended by the school committee without further appropriation for expenses incurred in providing education for students or take any action relative thereto. Would you explain this, because I think everybody's in a little bit,
What the heck are we looking at?
there's a mistake. 21.
Oh,
This is the revolving fund.
The revolver, right.
This is simply to, I believe this is the one that simply gets us to the point where we don't run into that 1% problem, which is to say, if the amount of money we generate in the revolver exceeds 1% of, and I believe it's the town budget, then,
Tax levy.
yes, the tax levy,
Tax levy.
then we've got a problem. And that makes no sense. So if you shift it from the chapter it's in now to chapter 71, you don't have that restriction. It does not relieve us of the responsibility not to spend any more than the revolver generates. It just gives us the freedom to spend what it does generate. That's all.
And the revolver has to be spent on what the revolver is for, not outside of it.
Correct. It's restricted by the nature of the revolver and the amount of money in the revolver.
The establishment, my understanding is the establishment of this as a Chapter 44 revolver was an accounting error.
I can't speak to that.
It should have been done under Chapter 71.
Our other revolvers are set up in the new account.
Right, it should have been a 71, and it was set up as a 44
Correct.
based on the recommendation.
Whether it was a mistake, I don't know, but we're rectifying the problem.
Will this cover your revolving transportation fund, and will it cover all of your revolving?
No. They're separate revolvers. Transportation is already a Chapter 71 revolver.
Okay,
Separate and distinct.
so this is just for one revolver, or?
Yes.
There are 2 articles on there for 2 different revolvers that are categorized as 41 that we want to move to.
And the reason they can't be combined is because each dollar is restricted to be spent on that specific area.
Kindergarten has to spend on kindergarten, and transportation on transportation.
would the funds also be subjected to the 30B procurement laws in any form or fashion? Because that's a concern to me that,
Yes,
okay,
that's the short answer.
that's, because I need,
Except if you're talking about procurement of, say, a vehicle. If you're talking about paying a salary of a teacher, no.
no, well, you know what, I mean, from a
Yeah.
capital standpoint.
From a capital
So our
standpoint.
30B,
Yes.
it's still subject to those as well, okay?
Yes.
Further questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Wow, 7-0.
Abstain, so you can keep this correct.
And,
Can we remove the other one?
Chapter 22, Article 22, to see if the town will vote to accept general laws, Chapter 71, Section 47, authorize the use of a revolving fund to be credited with funds received by the school committee in connection with the conduct of activities provided for under Chapter 71, Section 47, or any other activity not expressly provided for in that chapter, but sponsored by the school committee in participation, in which participation is contingent upon the payment of a fee by the participant. Such funds to be deposited with the treasurer and held as a separate account and expended by the school committee without further appropriation or take any action relative thereto. Shall I entertain a motion? So moved.
Sure.
Mr. McDonald seconds. Conversation, discussion, questions?
What's this particular fund for?
Does she have to school activity, right?
No, it's kindergarten.
This,
Kindergarten.
I believe this is the kindergarten.
Kindergarten.
And
All right, your explanation that's here says the intent of this article is to replace the current revolving account that was set up under Chapter 44 for kindergarten and preschool tuitions.
a minority, thankfully, of our kindergarten is half-day. The full day generates some dollars. That's the only reason, because there is revenue.
Are we at 22 or 22?
We're on 22. Any further discussion?
Wait just a second. Did we talk about in one of these things, oh, I'm sorry, I should have been more formal on that. Wait a second,
I
Mr.
have
Chair.
no idea what you're...
Did we not talk about on that sheet from the Wareham Public School cuts, the cutting out? Maybe we did.
I don't believe so.
The explanations are...
It wasn't kindergarten where you talked about a cut.
No, I'm reading, I'm
Yeah.
looking at it, it said explanations that I have here. The explanation's wrong.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't cutting out kindergarten.
We were cutting out,
That's what,
Assistant
what that's
principal.
asking for. This
well,
thing-
we were cutting out
22
quite a few things, but not kindergarten. As a matter of fact, as a result of the way,
I apologize, we have an explanation in here.
I'll shut up.
Oh, no, it's just,
It's okay.
So it's not kindergarten, or is it?
Right, the article states, any other activity not expressly provided for in that chapter but sponsored by the school committee in which participation is contingent upon the payment of a fee by the participant. Such funds will be deposited in the treasury and held in a separate account and expended by the school account without further appropriation. Sounds like any activity pursued by interest.
Which is full-day kindergarten.
That's Article 23.
I wish I had it in front of me.
Yeah, it's 22 that we have to then, because there's 4 articles revolving the revolvers. One is to go to change it, and then the other one is to then transfer the funds over.
Okay.
So that probably was the revolver that you guys just voted on, and then this is to move it from one account to the other. Then you're going to get the one with the kindergartner, and then the article after that you have to move it.
Why would it not state kindergarten and preschool in the article itself? We can't change the wording, but I would have thought it would have done that.
I'm sure legal had a reason for that, because the 223 is the transfer from the old kindergarten revolving. 24 is transfer from the special ed revolving.
All right, 22 is to allow it to go to chapter 71 for kindergarten and preschool. My fault.
Are you all set?
You all set?
Right.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? Not out of cause confusion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 700. Article 23, to see if the town will transfer account balances of the preschool and kindergarten tuition revolving account established under Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, as of June 30th, 2012, to the tuition revolving account established under Chapter 71, Section 47, and take any action relative thereto. So you're transferring the funds from the 44 to the 71.
Correct.
Okay. Motion?
Motion favorable action.
Okay. Motion second?
Second.
Second, Bonnie. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 700. Article 24, to see if the town will vote to transfer account balances of the special education tuition revolving account established under Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half as of June 30, 2012, to the tuition revolving account established under Chapter 71, Section 71F, or take any action relative thereto. So housekeeping article. Motion?
Favorable action.
Motion for favorable action by David, second. Second, Larry. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? 700. Article 25, to see if the town will vote to appropriate some money from the transportation revolving fund to purchase or lease new and/or used vehicles for the school transportation department, or any action relative thereto. Motion for favorable action?
I'll move the discussion.
I'll second it for discussion.
Ooh, that is not very much for discussion.
Ooh, I like that. You're a rough guy.
Motion was carried. Mr. McDonald seconded. All those in favor? No, sorry. Discussion? What is discussion?
No, she asked first.
Well, it's just that, I understand when I first heard this, you reduce the operating, the non-net school spending down to the 1.3. Can you just explain, what your plans are as far as, using this money towards any replacements?
Yes. Plan B or Plan C, Plan B would take all of the surplus that was generated by the revolver and use it to support the operating budget, because the difference between the two is about 200,000, plus or minus. Actually, we're cutting more than 200,000. We hope we'll generate 200,000 in surplus. That's a questionable thing because it represents entrepreneurial activity, shall we say, and we can only hope. But so the idea is that the revolver would support the activity of the operating budget to the extent that the operating budget didn't have sufficient funds. There would be, under the Plan B scenario, no use or very little use of the revolver to replace any vehicles whatsoever. Plan C is an entirely different story. And this gets to the issue of the sequencing of the articles. I would love it if the debt exclusion article of 360,000 came before this article, because it would have an impact on this article. Failing the debt exclusion for 360,000, then all of the fees, assuming the school committee voted to do that, that were generated by the parents, would flow into here. Plus, because we would be spending less in the operating budget because we'd be operating a smaller fleet with fewer drivers, then we would be much closer, by about 130,000 specifically, to level funded operating budget. That difference would stay in the revolver, supported by the fees, and hopefully produce a certain amount of money to do a modest amount of replacement. The short answer is, when it says a sum of money, the motion will have to have a sum of money, and I would expect that we'd settle on some number like maybe maximum of 300,000 just to be safe. But of course we couldn't spend any more than was in there. But that would be used for the replacement of vehicles as part of Plan C to offset the fact that the debt exclusion didn't pass.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
I'm not any authority on this whole purchasing capital expenditure, but it just kind of sets up a red flag.
It would still go to the town administrator, by the way.
Well, that's what I want town meeting to understand, you know, whatever that procedure has to be to authorize the purchasing when you get to that point. That, I mean, are you gonna wind up back at town meeting because you didn't get authorization?
No, there's two hurdles. One is town meeting has to authorize, that's what this is for, okay? The second hurdle is you still have to go through the procurement process.
Okay.
Which
Which
winds you back up at town meeting if you're going to procurement process.
No,
No.
no, because it's been authorized.
Can I just say one thing? So right now, the revolver, the way it's set up, does not allow us to purchase vehicles through the revolver. We have to go to town meeting, get appropriation to use the revolver to purchase vehicles. That's what this does. So all it's saying, I really don't think that we're going to use the revolver on transportation, on vehicles, because we're going to need it for the operating budget. But say that we did, say that somehow the transportation department won the lottery, that we would like to be able to use the revolver to purchase vehicles. And if we didn't pass this year, then we would have to wait until the next town meeting to be able to purchase vehicles.
Now, just to follow up, there's gonna come a point where you're saying this is basically plan B.
C.
C. All right, well, whatever alphabet we're at, if everybody goes through and just suddenly decides to be generous and say, sure, to all this, do you see where I'm going with this?
Then the sum of money,
It's a finite sum of money.
yes, it's certainly finite, but then the sum of money that would be used to, then the sum of money, it's complicated by the fact that fees will not be flowing in, but we also won't need any of that money to purchase any vehicles. So there's going to be that much less money in the revolver, and there would be really no point, because we currently have the authority to use the revolver to support the operating budget. What we don't have is the authority. It now appears, although there are legal arguments to the contrary, but who cares? We've given up on that. We don't have the authority to purchase replacement vehicles. That's what this specifically does.
It just increases our capacity to use the revolver, that's all it really does.
I see what happens when things get purchased without.
No, but you still gotta go through the same purchasing, you still have to
understand
do the purchasing protocols.
By the way,
Here's the thing, and I'll give you a good example. I'm gonna be police chief tonight, and I said I come in here, I want to buy three police cruisers. We say sure, because our men and women need them out there, because these vehicles get a lot of miles on it. Well, that word cruiser is a big word. You see what I'm saying? So now we've authorized someone to purchase something, and what we were thinking, or at least what I was thinking at the time, was something totally different than what happened.
See, I don't see that the same way. I just see this as saying, if you have the money and if you intend to use it to buy vehicles, this gives you the authority to do it.
But you're saying vehicles, and we're talking buses in our head.
Buses.
Yes.
Well, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying vehicles.
Buses.
See what
Oh,
I'm
whoa,
saying?
whoa, whoa, good point, because we
Buses.
want the authority to buy 7D vans.
Right,
Because in some cases, that'll be the right purchase.
right.
Okay, I'm just uncomfortable with this personally.
But you're authorizing us to use the revolver, not to purchase, but
That's
to
correct.
to authorize us to use the revolver to purchase the vehicles.
Right, but you're saying that in most cases with a purchase, especially a large dollar purchase like that, a purchase would have to come to town meeting. But now you're saying this is the
No,
article.
no, we still have to go through the procurement, we still have to go through the town administrator.
Time out. This is going to town meeting. How much
Right.
more specificity do you
No,
want?
no, I understand that, but you're using a very generic thing at town meeting. You're saying, this gives you the right to go out and purchase vehicles. You're not saying how many vehicles, you're not saying what type of vehicles,
And it doesn't say we're gonna do it.
Two things about
but it
that.
says that you have the right to do it.
Yes, two things
Right,
about
we're-
that.
We're debating it, and really, you see that we missing. the
But I
point.
think there's confusion.
And I think he's missing the point in that you're not, all you want is permission to take the money out of the account once it has passed town meeting. Because
Correct.
all vehicles
Exactly.
must go to town meeting. That's the
What
charge.
I was trying to say, but they're
Well,
saying they don't have to come back to town meeting.
No, they're not saying that. They're saying they need the authority.
This is
use
going
the
to
money.
town meeting. What am I missing?
No. They are specifically saying.
They're saying they don't have to go
not
back to
have
town
go back
meeting.
to town meeting
Listen
to
closely here.
purchase the vehicles.
Not forever, just this year.
No.
All right, Mr. Chairman, let me say this. We're gonna put a sum of money in there,
In the art.
in the article. Let's say it's 250,000. I don't know what it is, but we haven't picked a number yet for the motion. We're gonna specify that that is going to be used to purchase vehicles, which could be big buses, small buses, vans, whatever is necessary to support the transportation department. And guess what, town meeting? You're not gonna have to supply that money, okay? We're gonna generate it ourselves through the revolver. And, town meeting, we're gonna do this every year, okay? We're gonna come back and tell you what we'd like to do. I'm not sure how much, do you want the vehicle identification numbers of the vehicles? How much specificity do you
I want to know
want?
what you're buying. I don't want to say, here's $200,000, go buy whatever you want to buy, because that's what you're asking us to do.
Mr. Fidel,
Okay.
Yes.
get the capital planning.
The town charter says that capital planning has to approve all vehicle purchases. This also affects non-net spending, because even though our approval still has to get through the purchase process, which is town administrative. Right. Do we concede that point?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, in fairness, we understand how that process works. We cannot try and say that we want to specify what vehicles. And I'll give you an example. Dr. Rabinovich bypassed the checks and balances, didn't come to capital planning or town administrator till after the fact, but he had a sped vehicle that died. He took action with $91,000. He was either gonna spend a small fortune with transporting them,
Probably
he went
contract.
to get
By
permission,
contract. Exactly.
or he was going to spend $90,000, of which a bulk of it would have been spent trying to get permission to
I
buy it.
understand what you're saying.
Given the age of our buses and our fleet, why I'm somewhat uncomfortable with this, because I worry about bypassing the checks and balances. I do think that the school committee has got to be able to have some funds available for when one of these buses dies, that they can immediately take action, because there are some vehicles there are no replacements for. And those of us who have looked at this fleet are depressed.
Can-
We just need, in my opinion, to give them some options.
Can I
Will they
vote?
probably break the rules? Yeah, but
Well, I'm not,
All right, please.
I'm done.
Are you done?
I'm done.
all right, just make it simple. I understand what you're saying, but what we're now talking about is the word sum of money. Well, they haven't even decided how much they're gonna put in there yet.
much as they can.
Well, I understand that, but then we open up the, I don't know, you know what?
No, but it's coming from outside sources. I mean, we're estimating what we're gonna get from outside sources. It's not coming from the operating budget.
All right, I understand. We're sitting here right now, what's involved in this conversation is, all right, you're looking for the ability to purchase without going to town meeting, all right, which is specifically not allowed by the charter.
Thank you.
It's not allowed. The charter is very specific. Capital items must be approved by town meeting.
And I guess our view is this is going to town meeting.
But this gives you the right in perpetuity if you put
No,
some money in there.
for 1 year.
I'd like to table this until we have a chance to talk to council. I want to make sure we're all okay on this.
You know,
No, the problem is if I voted, then we have to go round and round in circles.
No.
Decision to re-vote it.
I have no control whatsoever whether you table or not table.
Right.
That is totally your discretion. But I am sitting here wanting to scratch my eyes out.
Why?
Because it's like heads you lose, tails you lose. No matter what this town, this school committee, or this school department, or this transportation does, it doesn't get any money to do anything, even though the buses are aged beyond belief. And when we generate money to do something that costs the taxpayers nothing, we're still being told, nah, we're not sure that's enough specificity. I have had it with trying to run the schools with no cooperation whatsoever.
It's not a matter of cooperation, it's a matter of legality, and I'm just trying to figure it out.
Legality? This is legal.
It's a charter.
Town council has told us it's legal. I'm sorry, Frank, I'm just frustrated. I apologize.
I had the same conversation earlier in the day. And you know, the exact same conversation.
We have a motion and we
Okay.
haven't seconded.
Pardon?
Don't we have a motion and we haven't seconded?
Right, the
We vote on it?
conversation you wanted to.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, I do, and I understand to have a contingency in the event that something breaks down. But there are people that have a great deal of control problems with town meeting, and they think that that's what they're supposed to do. And I understand that. But we're under the same situation with the EMS service, where they run a profitable service, but they can't purchase a vehicle with the money that they bring in either. They don't have that authorization. So it's kind of like, do we follow the charter, right to the letter of the law? I feel as though we need to discuss that with town council before voting on this particular article.
I would be more than happy to have anybody else take control over this process, if they would actually do something. But in fact, this process is being totally controlled and nobody is purchasing anything.
I
So,
agree.
I am, as far as I'm concerned,
We're not in
I'm
disagreement.
failing in my fiduciary responsibility to the children of Wareham. Take control. It's all yours.
Any, looking for a motion to table?
Motion to table.
Second? Or a second to table?
Oh, second. Do I need to withdraw my original motion now?
No.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Aye.
I'm opposed to
What do you want to do with it?
I'm on
You're
board.
opposed to tabling, what do you want to do?
Aye.
You vote the original motion?
Yes, I do.
I'll give it back to the original motion.
So you're gonna, wait a minute, we're, as the finance committee, you're gonna authorize purchasing without going through town meeting?
Oh,
That's
no,
not what
Frank.
they're-
That's not what it is. I'm sorry. you
I'm sorry, I
misunderstood.
don't see it either. We have a motion on the, we have a motion and it's seconded and
No,
I
I'm trying to understand this. The motion is to allow purchases out of this fund without going to town meeting.
It's not town's money.
And the town charter says that you have to go to town meeting.
It's generated with town property.
This is not, I'm telling you, they are not the only one in this situation.
Can we get a revote on
Can we get what?
Can we get a revote on the motion to table?
no,
No, they're not.
no, I think it's,
Fine.
If I might just, you're asking a question, you want an answer, or is your question rhetorical?
It's somewhat rhetorical. You know, you're asking the chair to, you know, I mean, you're asking me to allow a vote on something that's against the charter.
Your opinion.
That's right.
Your opinion.
That's already come down.
No, I'm sorry, that's your opinion. You're reading the charter the way you want. I don't
No,
take that.
when we leased the cruisers originally, the opinion was that even though they were leased and being used, we still had to go to town meeting for authorization. So we have precedent. We have precedent.
Who's Mr. Slavin? He be jumping up and down.
We're back to the original
Mr.
motion.
Slavin would be along with
Jumping
the
up and
same
down.
ones, and you know, we catch it.
I'm gonna have to vote against the motion because you are correct in what you're saying.
I'm not trying to be impossible, it's
No.
just this conversation's been held so many times. And it's been the council so many times. I wanna go back one more time and make sure we can bring this to the floor. And I don't want the committee to be on the wrong side of legal counsel.
Can point of information?
No, that's all right. All those in favor?
Oh,
No,
All those in favor of the motion?
The motion.
I'm sorry, I thought you wanted to vote on the motion.
What motion? We just.
Motion.
the original
The
motion.
motion for the original motion is for favorable action.
wait a second, was that withdrawn?
I never withdrew.
No.
Your withdrawal motion, that's what Don is saying. All those in favor?
Aye.
3.
This is the, okay.
A motion in favor of this motion. All opposed?
No,
No. 3-4.
that's not what I wanted.
No,
That's
that's
not
not
what
what
I
I
wanted.
wanted. Sorry, Frank.
I will be looking for reconsideration of it. No.
Can I ask?
340.
340. Article 26, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate contingent upon the approval of the Proposition 2.5 override, the sum of money to avoid teacher layoffs or take any action relative thereto. Have a motion?
So moved.
Need a second? Discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? All those opposed?
Opposed.
Wait,
Any
sorry, I did that one real quick.
What?
What are we talking about here?
Article 26, to see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate contingent upon the approval of a Proposition 2.5 override, a sum of money to avoid teacher layoffs or take any action relative thereto.
And there's a dollar figure on the
It's $780,000.
I have-
Am I
I
correct?
have a motion, I have a second. Is there any discussion? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no fixed amount on this right now, it's just a sum of money. They're suggesting it would be 780,000. I would imagine that would be amended on the floor.
Let me read through this. I'm just trying to read through them.
I couldn't get the vote because they didn't put their hands up.
Oh, well, you went and come back. I'm ready.
So the difference, just for clarification, debt exclusions last for a period of time. Overrides go on forever.
So you unoverride it.
Until there's an underride.
Do you anticipate an underride anytime?
Not in my lifetime,
Mine either.
and that could be shorter than you know.
I hope not, Jeff, I'm sorry.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
This is pretty specific, this particular article, in that it pinpoints the teacher layoffs, which the school committee has said is $780,000. My only concern is that with all of the other budget cuts on the town side, there may be some employees who say, well, what about our job, what about our job, what about our job? I do feel favorably on the article as it's written right now to save the teachers. I'm gonna pretty much leave it up to town meeting floor as to how many jobs they'd like to save beyond that. But
I think I actually know.
that's said.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes, you may.
See, my problem is, you're right, the town, people on town side are gonna say, what about us, what about us? They had just the same opportunity that the school committee and the school had to write overrides or debt exclusions, and they didn't. So the school committee's being proactive, whereas maybe the town's not so proactive, if you will. So it doesn't make me support what they're trying to do any less because the town didn't do that. So that's just my opinion, so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. And just so you know, you did receive another piece of paper here tonight that there are additional cuts. Again, this is just for the teachers, and so, you know, when we are talking through, the school has made additional layoffs and cuts. This is just, you want to be able to say, the teachers.
Oh, yeah, it still says 790.
And I guess this is, well, it's,
So,
no, well, it doesn't belong here, because you're just voting on the article, but if it doesn't pass, and if it's not voted on, I mean, by the townspeople, that there's not only gonna be layoffs, there's gonna be other cuts, there's gonna be draconian cuts in the school department. If this doesn't pass the voters, I'm telling you right now, we have dismantled public education in Wareham, in my opinion, just dismantled it. And I don't know how we're gonna ever recoup from it. I really don't.
any other comments?
No.
No? Mr. Sweat?
One question that has been asked me, which I think is germane to what Bonnie is talking about, and the question that has been asked multiple times of me on the street is, if I vote for this, how do I know that this money will be used the following year for the same purpose? And the answer is, there is zero guarantee whatsoever. So, just,
Can't the ballot vote be specific?
No.
You can't?
And for this year, for
It's
next
sim-
year,
it goes into the general fund, and then this process, God help us, goes on again a year from now. And the allocations, the prioritization, et cetera, will go through the same process. We'll simply be $780,000 better off, but how that $780,000 gets used will be up to this body to recommend, the school committee to recommend, and the voters to decide.
And also, will it go, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But it will be controlled by who? After this year, when we were sitting there talking about teachers, that's what it is for this year. Next year, they got $780,000. Now, who owns that 78?
TA.
So, if he decides he doesn't want to fund your school, he can go out and fund whatever he wants.
That's correct.
No, it
Yeah.
won't.
It's still gonna
No,
get voted
it
on.
is still up to the voters on town meeting.
Correct.
Okay, but as far as proposing,
Right.
he can propose whatever he
You
wants.
can rest assured, if he does that, he's gonna have one king-size fighter in his hand in town meeting.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Whoever he is.
He or she.
he or she, Mr. Trudell?
So, in the second year, we're relying on the honesty and integrity of dealing with the same issue that we did with meal tax.
You didn't really want to say that, did you?
Yeah,
I did, because I would like to see the school get some of that money.
This does happen at the state level all the time. The
Yes.
first year is always designated, and then after that, it's in the general fund. And the original program intended disappears.
You know, and I know you've heard it before, this group has heard it before, and we've come before you, and you've been in enough joint meetings, and you've heard it before. We have been chipping away over the last 10 years, chipping away at the academic integrity of our school department. And now we're no longer chipping away, I mean, we're taking a jackhammer to it. And, I mean, there's just no place to go. And, you know, this took an awful lot of debate at the school committee level in the superintendent and meetings and budget subcommittees and so forth. And I kind of agree with what Mr. McDonald said. I mean, it took a lot of courage for us to come up with this. Because you know what? Not to disagree with you, but we have a revenue problem in this town, a very bad one. And you can't solve a revenue problem consistently on the expense side of the ledger. It just can't be done. And yes, I know a family has got the same kind of revenue problem, but they do have options to them. They can sell couches, they can get a part-time job. There's all kinds of ways in which a family can bring money into a household that is not always open to us. So this is kind of the only way that is open to us to not totally dismantle Wareham Public Schools. And so to put this on the ballot, I think took a lot of courage. And it's been kicked around already politically, and we knew it would. But you know what? It's the right thing to do right now, in my opinion. Right now, it's the right thing to do. And ultimately, it's going to be the choice of the voters.
If it goes through that.
I do have a question. I do have a question, and I apologize if it's out of order. If the motion related to school buses specified the vehicles that we wanted to purchase, 2 large buses, 1 7D van, blah, 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 whatever. We don't know.
That was my point of information before, but
But
can we finish this one first?
let's assume we did it. We specified. It was on a wing and a prayer because we had no idea whether we'd actually have the money to do it. But we specified it, and it was authorized. Would that, in your opinion, allow it to be consistent with the charter?
I don't have an answer to that, that's why I want to go talk to council.
Mr.
Because,
Chair,
and the reason I was so frustrated is because I've talked to council, and they assured me that that was what we accomplished, because I would have never put that article before this committee or town meeting if I didn't think it was going to solve a problem. Why waste your time, my time, and town meeting's time?
Jeff, I'm sorry, but I think that what the chair has said here is that he's going to ask for a reconsideration, and I think that he is already thinking that way. It was my point of information that if there was specificity in there, but we have an article that we're talking about right now, the override, so I think that that's where it's going. But
Yes, it is.
I
We'll
just
go to
don't
him
want to get off
very-
this override article.
I think we're off the override. It is what it is.
But there's no vote on
you know,
that.
I know that.
Okay, so I have to go to Liz.
Many people talk to council, and many people get opinions from council, that's the
Right.
problem. Okay.
And I trust the judgment of this committee that they're going to go back and look at that article again.
Is there any more on Article 26, which is 2.5 override? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
That'd be 5-0.
Start on the next one.
The next article, Article 27, is read. It's the form a committee for the Vermont School Building Committee, that's what it is. It's specified by the state as to who is, what the committee members will be and where they come from. You all have it in front of you. It's quite lengthy, so I'm not going to read this one.
I'll make a motion.
Motion for favorable action.
Second.
And second?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you might understand that this doesn't affect the question of the Minot School. Oh, this is something we need to put in place for the study committee to be able to move forward. No matter what we do, it's one of the hurdles we have to pass in order for us to get to Article 28.
It's a requirement.
Requirement, yes.
It doesn't cost the town any money to my
Not to appoint the
knowledge.
committee.
No.
Right. And if 28 doesn't pass, it's a moot issue.
Right.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 7-0.
So 6, 1 and 3.
No, sorry, 6-0.
She would have voted yes.
She would have written it down. She would have written it down perfectly. 28 is to see if the town will vote to authorize the treasurer to borrow some money contingent upon the approval of a proposition 2.5 debt exclusion to be expended under the direction of the Minot Forest School Building Committee for a feasibility study of the Minot Forest Elementary School at 63 Minot Avenue, Wareham, Mass., for which feasibility study the town may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority The MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any cost the town incurs in connection with the feasibility study in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town or take any other action relative thereto. Motion for favorable
action.
Have a second?
Second.
Mr. McDonald, discussion?
I just want to add, I mean, the way I heard this and from the other meetings that we're working on the master plan, if this doesn't pass, then we go to the back of the line, not just for Maya, but for Deacon's, I believe we go to the back of the line. If we do not raise this sum of money, then we go to the back of the line, and it may be 10 years till we ever again. And if you've been to the schools, there's issues.
First off, you're knocked out, it may not take 10 years, and I think the 10-year statement is based on by the time you get on and go through all the study processes
Right.
again and build the school, it could be as much as 10 years before the first child walks in.
But that was the specific question I asked Dr. Rabinovich when he sat here, because I heard the same thing. And I accepted that the individual had misspoke. Since it is not.
Sorry, there's no list, but what Dr. Rabinovich said before is that it's a process that they go through evaluation, and that if you don't go through the motions, then you're out, and then it's a decision that they make on when you get back in. And
Correct.
based on other folks that have come out and gone back in and needs-based, and all of a sudden there might be schools that have larger needs than us. So we don't know if it'll take us another 2, 6, 10, 15 years to be able to get to the stage that we're at right now. But there is no official list that you automatically get bumped to the bottom.
It will put us behind, though, there's absolutely no question. It will
There's
consider.
no chance that we'll ever get on it again.
I think the best way to explain it is that, as they said in the phone conversation, was that they need to see your commitment to the project. And if you don't have the money by November 9th, then obviously the citizen doesn't support it.
270 days.
Right, if they don't support it, then obviously you're not gonna get on it again next year. I mean, they're gonna hesitate, because they're trying to spend the money wherever they can as quickly as they can.
Feasibility.
I think they said they had, what, 140 that they're going through right now, 140 applications.
Oh, I think
Yes, sir.
the only small point I'd make is an obvious one, and that is, this would be another signal to parents with respect to whether they want to educate their children here. It is either a community that invests in its infrastructure. The problem is, as your representative to the Capital Planning Committee knows so well, there are many, many things that this town needs in addition to another school. The difference, of course, is that here we can anticipate 60 to 70% reimbursement, and our other capital projects are basically not reimbursed.
Any further discussion? Paulson?
I have an observation, and you may say this is out of order. We're asking the town employees to take a 3.75% pay cut. Now, that's part of this. Well, what's being done on the school side? You're saying to us, well, we've got to pass this for the kids. We've got to convince the parents this is good. But have you gone, I know you've said that the steps, I believe, have been frozen for a year. What about going to the teachers and saying, look, this is wonderful, but the system has changed. Town doesn't have the money to do these things in the future. And we have to do things much differently. We're gonna have to eliminate all steps. I realize that this gets into a much deeper conversation, a philosophical conversation.
But, Mr. Paulson, we have done that. And I'm gonna give you one perfect example, okay? We're not gonna talk about the cuts we've made. You wanna talk about a concession? The high school teachers made a great concession last year. They're working 20% more time for the same amount of money. 20% more time for the same amount of money. Now, where I come from, that's a concession, a huge concession.
Let me just respond to that. And I appreciate what you're saying, but if I wanted to go to work for Ford Motor Company today, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was $30 an hour. Now I go to work for them at $15 an hour. It
Right.
may come to, and again, and I don't wanna belabor the point, it may come to you having to go to the teachers and say, you're not only working 20% more, you're gonna have to take a 20% pay cut.
Well, they did take a 0% increase a year
I'm
ago.
talking about
different.
act,
That's right.
I've said enough on this. I think that's a problem within the town.
I do understand that you and I can philosophically disagree on that, because I'm gonna tell you, we cannot solve the woes of the town on the back solely of the public employees.
And I'm not saying that the school department is trying to do that, that's not my point.
No. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstentions? 6-0. Sorry, 6-1-0. I'm confused on that. I think that's everything. I'll get back, I will put that revolver on the next agenda. I will be talking, not just for you, but for another department as well, about the same issue with council, all right? To see if it'll change what he told me the last time. Okay, to see if it'll agree with what he told you the first time. If I may. All right. Next on the agenda.
I want to, excuse me, I just want to thank the indulgence of the committee and the time that you've given us, and for the emotionalism of this chairman.
We thank you
I
for
don't
all of
worry
your
about it,
emotions.
don't worry about
It's been around me too
It's
long.
not an easy issue, bro.
I knew where you were going, you were gonna, all you wanna do is click clarification, that's it.
Thank you, folks.
If I would like to, Mr. Sweat, before you stand up though, all right, I think I speak for the committee when I say we appreciate your emotionalism. All right, so therefore, I know even I personally do not take offense to it.
No, not at all.
None taken.
Not at all.
Committee, motion to adjourn?
So moved.